Hi, Brandon. It's so nice to have you here at the summit.
Hey, what's going on, Lauren? Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
If we could just start, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, anything relevant.
Yeah, that's always the infinite question, isn't it? I think the short or maybe concise way to really tap into it is I'm someone who is full of love and full of passion and full of just love for this universe, love for people, love for creating. And how that shows up on a professional level is I'm a coach and I help people tap into the most peaceful and happy state of being so that they can really tap into what their greatness is, tap into what, brings them alive. And yeah, that's a big part of why I'm here. And I feel very connected to speaking with you guys about this as well.
Well, and I know, so you're a health coach, a holistic health coach. Can you explain, like, do you only work with physical health or dietary stuff, or can you just get a little bit more detail about that?
Yeah, so, as far as looking at health, there's so many different layers. There's the physical body, there's the mental, the emotional, and no matter what someone's belief system is, there's also that spiritual realm as well. And I work in looking at the entire spectrum of the body. So, when we talk about physical, we talk about nutrition, we talk about taking care of, the input of what we're putting inside of our systems. And really the mind to body connection between what's going in our minds and what's going inside of our bodies. All of these things are interconnected. And what I've learned in my own journey of just growth and having a couple almost near-death experiences due to health issues and these different aspects is when we allow space to take care of ourselves and to really tap into what it is that is our most authentic essence or the most authentic way that we can show up in the world, then naturally we're going to at different times come into contact with whether it's the physical body, whether it's what are my thoughts, what am I thinking, what is these stories that I'm creating for myself, and then the emotions too. The emotions are a particular aspect that, especially as a man, and not trying to generalize this, but I think in Western culture, just sometimes the pace of society and some of the stereotypes can, for lack of better terms, maybe not honor the importance of the expression of different emotions and how we feel in the present moment. So really looking at health from a whole entire spectrum, a whole entire um, motion of how are things looking in all facets of life, because us as beings, we are here to experience all these different areas and be able to tap into what we need in that moment to move forward.
Well, and I know, so you kind of had an unconventional journey to getting to where you are as a coach. You worked in the corporate world for quite some time and you were very successful at it.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that? I just think it's a really interesting story.
No, it's interesting. It's fascinating. I grew up playing sports. I loved basketball growing up, and I played different sports, but basketball was kind of my thing. And as I went through high school and as I started to go to university, one of my big things was like, I'm not good enough to play professionally. I kind of knew that and respected that. But I had this desire at the time to, man, if I can work in sports and I can kind of work in a setting where I'm close to the action or close to the professional realm, I think that would be awesome. So that was a big part of my focus, whether it be in university and working in the professional football league as well as the National Basketball Association. And I had worked there for almost, excuse me, I had worked in professional sports in the corporate sports arena for almost 8.5, 9 years. And that was what I originally thought was like the mountaintop. I thought that was like, oh, you know, for me personally, I said, healthy six-figure income, being able to have a lot of different benefits and perks, and I won't go into all the details on that, but really recognizing that I have a great deal of respect and appreciation for that particular time of my life. And the, I guess, how that led into coaching was I've always been, curious and always been really fascinated by the human body. And the reason behind that kind of came in on an unconscious level when I was younger. I used to get these really, really bad migraine headaches for years. And this was all the way from about the age of 7 or 8 years old, going up to almost 11. Excuse me. And within those headaches, what would end up happening is I would end up, feeling so much pain. It almost felt like I had this throbbing, that this sensation that was happening, in my brain. And I would drop to my knees and I would kind of sometimes start screaming, and people around me would wonder what's going on. And what ended up happening was, after all these tests and doctors and all these tests on my head, and this went on for years, I was trying out for a little league baseball team. And during tryouts, I, had another episode. So these episodes would only happen when my heart rate would raise past a certain level. And, I did a drill and I was sprinting, kind of trying to compete and go as fast as I could against myself. And that episode happened. And I ended up going to the emergency room and had an emergency surgery. And the reason I bring that up is because from a young age, I've had this hypersensitivity, or this hyper awareness of needing to pay attention to my breath, and needing to like regulate my body and the sensations, because of this something that was happening abnormally inside of me. And that led to, even as I went through college and I went through university and started working in the corporate realm, always still having this passion of studying, nutrition, studying psychology, studying these different aspects, of taking care of this temple that we all have. And one of the areas that um, I recognized on my own journey was, I used to be 60, almost 70 pounds heavier, at certain times throughout my journey. And whenever I really understood the food to body connection and started incorporating different habits and patterns around food, the weight naturally started to go away.
Mhm.
And as the weight naturally started to go away, it left energy or space to not necessarily need to put focus towards that. But what ended up happening, I really started to recognize my mental, maybe certain aspects around anxiety or depression or certain thoughts that were now at the forefront. We're like, wow, like, why is my mind racing? Why do I feel so down? And why do I feel so is this normal? Is this kind of something that I need to pay more attention to? And really got into to meditation and got into yoga. And this is still while I'm in my corporate job, by the way. And I was there and I said, oh, this is the answer. Yo, just eat really good, take care of your mind, meditate, and boom, that's it. Like, problem or life solved. And then I was there and I was, developing these practices. And as I mentioned, I was, doing very well financially. I was doing very well in my career. I had worked and busted it in order to get to that position. And then the purpose piece came in. I was like, man, I could feel it in my heart. I said, I'm not resonating with this. And this tug of war went on for years of, well, this is what you wanted. This is what you asked for. You wanted to work this, and you asked for a certain amount of income, and you got here. And then the other side was like, man, the heart, but are you really making the impact that you desire? Or are you doing something that you love? And this went on, for a little while, until the point where, I made the decision to make a leap. And within that leap, I had this vision of, I really desire to make an impact doing this type of work when it comes to coaching, because of my own experiences and of the own, former struggles that I had. So hopefully that's a roundabout way of bringing everything back to the question that you asked.
Brandon, yeah, that was fascinating to listen to. The disconnect, or I forget how you described it. You mentioned about your heart, but I kind of feel like in your old life in the sports world was no longer right, and you had this desire to make this leap. Did the yoga and meditation you were doing at the time in any way make that more apparent, or do you feel that that was kind of building anyway?
I think if I'm being honest, great question, Jazz. If that, I think it was always there. You know, I think sometimes, you know, on a, for lack of better terms, on an egoic level, there was this desire to, you know, I grew up a certain way where maybe finances and certain aspects where there was always issues around that. So one of my big things as a kid and even as I got older was like, I'm gonna, you know, never live paycheck to paycheck. I'm gonna make X amount of dollars. And once I had that, that's the happy life.
Mhm.
And even though I knew that, you know, sports in general, it's not an industry when you first start that you're making much money, but as you climb the ladder and you get to a point where you build yourself up, you can make some really good money. You know, I guess, and that's a relative term. I think what happened for me was even when I first got into the corporate realm, I always, even at the beginning, I felt like I desired something um, more holistic, but I just didn't have a name for it.
Mm.
You know, I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and he's in the corporate space. He loves it. You know, he's an executive for one of the teams, and we used to work with each other at the very like one of the first years that I started to work in the corporate realm. He asked me back then. He said, "Man, so kind of what's your end game? What's your goal? Like, you want to be a manager or a VP?" And I said, "No, I want to do something that is helping people. You know, like with taking care of themselves." And he's like, "Oh, so you want to be a personal trainer?" I was like, "No, I don't want to be a personal trainer." So, "Oh, you want to be like a dietitian or nutritionist?" And I said, "No, I don't really know what, don't really, you know, truly want to really be that or kind of it being called that." And, but I knew back then, and this is before the whole yoga, the meditation, I knew there was something inside of me that desired to really integrate and to really connect with people. I think the yoga, to answer the question, that the yoga and the meditation, it quieted all the noise down.
Yeah.
It quieted the anxiety. It quieted the, um, you know, kind of recreating a new story instead of looking at the negatives or the why am I here? Why am I doing this? It, you know, just started looking for more possibilities. What do I truly love? What do I truly want to create? If I wasn't working or if I wasn't receiving any income, what would I do for free and be absolutely thrilled and fulfilled by it? And it kept coming back to this piece. It kept coming back to this. So yeah, the meditation and the yoga was something I would say, you know, I wrote a blog post about this. It really changed, it really saved my life, because whenever I first got into the practice of meditation, it was at a time when I was on the surface, you would think like, there's no way, you know, that can happen. But I was working maybe 50, 55, 60 hours a week. My mother, I was responsible financially for taking care of her at that particular period of my life. And I knew from a deep place inside of me that I no longer had a desire or passion for the work I was in. I was highly stressed. I was in a relationship that was on the cusp of basically ending, and I started to get into the meditation. I said, "Hey, like, I don't have enough time for this. I'm already working this much and doing all these things." And then once I actually developed the, you know, I committed. I said, "I'm going to do this. I'm going to try this out. At first, I'm going to do 20 minutes a day." And I did it in the morning time before I would go on runs. So I woke up like 30 minutes earlier. Started the first week and was doing it once a day. By the second week, I said, I'm going to incorporate twice. I was doing it again in the evening after work. And continuing to do that months on end, I recognized how much more time started to slow down and how much more I was able to look at my stuff, like everything that was in front of me, and not go into this, not fall back or not create this, whether it be depression or anxiety. I was like, wow, I'm able to see all this stuff that's in front of me, and I recognize, that's there, and this there, and this is there, and that's there, but I'm not like, I'm able to process it and just look at it straight on without, diving too deep and falling into this, this mode of for lack of better terms, victim consciousness.
Mm. And so much of this stuff overlaps, doesn't it? Holistic health, it's fascinating. The physical, the emotional, the spiritual, changing what you eat changes the mind, the body. So there's so much stuff in there. You mentioned being being a sensitive person. Do you feel that this stuff affects us more, or perhaps in a different way, to non-sensitive people in your experience?
Yeah, I can only speak in my experience, but
Of course, everybody know your own reality. But yeah, what is your
yeah, 100%. It's interesting because I when I found out, and I'm really big on not being, you know, classified by labels in a
Mhm.
sense. We can all look at certain things and we can take what serves us and leave what maybe doesn't. But I remember this was in November of 2013. I don't know how I came across it, but I came across the Myers-Briggs personality assessment, and I was at my office cubicle, and I took the test, and two things happened. First, I saw an I for introvert. I was like, no way. I had kind of this perception that introverts, or they don't talk at all, and they're social. They have social anxiety, and I've honestly never really been that way. I've always been a communicator and very expressive. So I said, that's interesting. And then I saw it said INFJ. And I said, okay, cool, whatever that means. And as I'm reading up on the description, it literally brought tears to my eyes while I'm in front of all these people at my job. I literally had to get up and leave the office. This is probably like a office setting. There's probably around 25, 30 people in there. And I went to the bathroom and I just kind of like sat down. I was reading more of it, and just tears and tears and tears were coming like from me. And a part of me was like, why am I crying? Like, what's happening? And another part of me was just like, I know exactly why I'm crying, because this is like the first time I've ever read something or really felt in a way understood. I felt, it talked about sensitivity and intuition in certain aspects. And I was in a very hyper competitive, very high pressure type of sales culture. And a lot of my colleagues, the people, just when you think of that type of culture and that type of environment, not only being competitive, but a lot of them are former athletes as well. And this isn't knocking, athletes or any of that, because I also played, and I played a year of junior college basketball, so I love the sport. But that particular setting and environment, it no longer, it was kind of like this light bulb that went off for me. It's like, this is why on game days, when there's 100,000 people here, I'm literally running to my car, or I'm trying to leave the stadium as quickly as I can. This is why when we are at maybe certain events and there's a lot of people and fluorescent lights and a lot of noise, that I find myself gravitating towards the bathroom or trying to create more space for myself. So I didn't have any awareness of this until then. And that was I was already kind of on a path of trying to better understand myself and accept myself, and learning that I was, that being the first blueprint of saying like, oh, sensitive. Oh, this is why I eat this way. And maybe I'm getting made fun of by certain people I work with, like, oh, you eat so healthy and you do this, but recognizing that if I don't take care of my body, then it affects every single other aspect of my life, and kind of recognizing that. So yeah, the sensitivity piece, that was a huge eye opener for me. And I've talked to Lauren about this in the past too. Like I fought it so hard for years and years and years. I was like, am I creating an excuse? I'm tough. I've experienced this and I've experienced that, and I'm a risk taker, and I like to live life on the edge, and I do these things. I said, maybe I'm just creating a new story for myself that is coming up with excuses on why I shouldn't or am not able to do certain things to the degree that maybe some other people who may not be sensitive are able to do it. And I kept running into wall after wall. It was like if I tried to avoid it, like time and time again, something would happen to show me like, okay, Brandon, you need to slow down. You need to take care of yourself. You need to, be more present with not only your body and your mind, and ultimately, the work I do today, it's very much, it's rooted. A big, huge part of it is through myself, because of all of the different things that I've experienced and I've gone through, where I recognize that there are so many people out there who feel either misunderstood, who feel like the pace of society and culture just moves in at a vibration that is not truly serving them. And instead of looking at it from the side of the why aspect, I like to look at it on the side of, okay, how can we create the best, the most authentic, the most aligned, the most powerful version of yourself, and the process in which just deeply understanding yourself and having an outlet of support. Because if I recognize one thing, and then I'll shut up, about, again, not placing all these generalizations, but if I recognize one thing about tend to be introverts, and especially creatives, is there's this piece of, I can do it on my own. I can figure it out. And I know I have had a lot of that inside of me as well. Like, I don't need support. I don't need any, I can do this. And sometimes, yes, that's a beautiful energy, because it can really, be very warrior-like, and you see things and you say, I'm going to continue to put my best foot forward. But in other times, it's, I think we all reach a certain point in our life where we recognize that we, need to surround ourselves with people who are in that same field, or who can relate to us. But we need support, not us just always giving, helping others, and not receiving anything back. So, yeah, hopefully that answers it.
Can I ask, Brandon, one of the things I love that you talk about is the emotional expression piece for men. And I know I had the same experience as you when I found out I was INFJ. It shattered my world. And since then, I've made all these INFJ friends, and a lot of them are men. And they've said it was even stronger for me, because like you said, in Western culture, being a man, it comes with a certain package. You don't cry, you don't tap into your emotions. Like, can you talk a little bit about that emotional? Well, I guess it's two parts. Can you talk a little bit about being an INFJ man, first of all, and second of all, that emotional expression piece for men? That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's okay though. That's why we're here. INFJ man. When I first read that, and I saw like a third of one, it's and you'll have to correct me if I'm off on this, but only it's only like 1% or 2% of the entire population, and then only a third of that is men. So I thought it was like a death sentence. It's like, oh my goodness, like what am I doing in this particular lifetime, where I'm not only am an INFJ, like the smallest fraction of a percentage, I'm a man, and not to put any another generalization on it, but I'm a Black man as well. So I said, okay, so this not only you know, is what's in front of me. Like what is something that I'm able to take from this, in a sense of how can I um, best utilize this for who I am. And one of the aspects that I've learned in my own journey, and I help clients with as well, is emotions. There is so much energy around emotions and what we experience, and whether it's all the way from our, when we're younger, or whether it's in a relationship, or whether it's um, different aspects of our life where, if we did not have a model who was very expressive, or who could communicate the range of emotions that they may feel, then that was essentially what we harbored, or what we picked up from. Because as kids, they say, do as I say, not as I do, but what we end up modeling is what we see. And rest in peace, my father, he was one who, he didn't really know how to express emotions. The only emotions that he really expressed were anger, and if it was anger, or it was happiness. There wasn't really sadness, and there wasn't this piece of me feeling like I could have a conversation with my pops. And again, I was much younger when he passed. I was only 11 years old. But with certain types, if we're staying on the whole sensitivity issue, um, you feel things that so much more deeply, and you feel different aspects. It's I was just talking to a client recently, and it was, like, one week it was like, yes, everything is like kind of awesome, and I'm feeling good, and all these good things are happening. And then the next week it was kind of the polar opposite. And I was just like, it's okay. Like, we feel those things. We feel the great stuff. If we're really harbored in and tapped into our emotions, we feel that with so much more vivid, with so much more vividness, so much more of a color. And then we also feel some of the hurt and the sadness, and maybe some of the fear and the anger deeply as well. And when we can recognize that both of them are okay, and that they'll both will pass, it's not like this is creating an attachment to, if I'm 100% happy right now, then I want to be like this forever. I desire to feel this way all the time. It's in my experience, as I became more in tune with my own emotions. And a lot of this started to happen when I began journaling, and was going through this bout where I felt like I was stuck, and I felt trapped. And I was kind of in this spot of, we already mentioned with the job, and financial responsibilities, and, oh, I built this up. And I just began journaling, just like putting out emotions, putting out how I felt, putting out, started blogging. And at first it was just 100% about, I'm doing this for myself. I'm not going to share any of this with anybody. And then as time started to develop, it turned into um, sharing even more intimate aspects, and being even more vulnerable, and recognizing that there are so many people out there that are experiencing the same things, the same emotions. And one last thing, when I came across, for lack of better terms, my personality type, and I mentioned the emotional, um, the emotions that arose during that time, I remember being that person, years ago, going and searching and looking for different blogs, and seeing other people talk about it. And I felt like, oh, okay, I'm understood. I can connect with this. So then I felt for myself, I have a responsibility to do the same, you know, to put information out there, to put things out there that I think can ultimately help people, and help them feel like they're heard, and they're not isolated, and they're not alone. There's a huge, relatively huge, community of other people who we all deal with the same things, and we're all here to connect and relate to one another.
Yeah, I love that. I Before we started recording, Jazz was talking about a video you did about crying. And I think that's such an important thing because I've always felt like crying is something your body actually needs to do. I've just instinctively felt that, like you're flushing, you're flushing the emotions out, but it's almost like you're changing your body chemistry too. When I do it, I feel so much better. But I know for men, it's really hard. And I know some men, I actually have a male friend who said he hasn't cried since he was 4 years old. And he's like 30. He's extremely emotionally repressed. But what can men do to sort of work with that piece if they're uncomfortable crying, or if they haven't cried in years and years and they're like, I don't even feel like I can, I'm numb. Like, what's the next step there?
Yeah, a great question. One of the things is, if you know someone, whether it's specifically, I would say even another man, but even if it's a woman as well, someone that you feel you can actually, like, who truly listens to you, who's coming from a place of non-judgment, who can just be a container, a space for you to communicate authentically how you feel, how you express yourself. Sometimes that's all people really need in the present moment, is to be around, or to be able to sometimes, whether it's colleagues, friends, family, we all have these different relationships, and we all know that there are certain people that we can talk to about certain things and they'll listen to us, and then there are people that we know that before we even say something, that maybe we're being judged. And one of the most important aspects, or the important parts that I recognize, is having relationships with people who allow you to just communicate, to be able to express yourself. And it's a process that, it can take time to develop, because I think, naturally, if it's not something that has been promoted, or whether it's endorsed maybe by your parents, or you grew up within that, especially as a man, then there can be this uncomfortability around it. One of the things that Jazz was saying too, that on the video, and I haven't seen it in a while, but I talked about the beauty of crying, and how my previous relationship to that, was very rigid, and kind of holding on to emotions, and I got this, that's a weakness, I can't be vulnerable, and really just being so open to express, and I'm not going to say I cry on a daily basis, but when I get into my element, and whether it's through writing, and if I'm even seeing clients, there's been numerous times that a client and I have cried right alongside each other. And it's from this place of just like openness, and like there's so much beauty in being able to share that, whether it's for yourself or share it with someone else, because once there is an emotional release, it's interesting. I had one lady, she's not a client, but she works in real estate, and she's very ambitious, and she is somebody who has a lot on her plate. She's a single parent, and her and I had a session together, a complimentary session, a one-on-one, and within that session, she cried. And when I talk about crying, I mean, it was a huge expression of it. And she kept apologizing. I said, no, 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 don't apologize. Like, this is 100% okay. And there was just so much. She's like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know. This has never happened to me, before. And all this came out. She sent me an email the next day stating that she's like, I don't know what happened last night, in our session, but I lost 4 pounds. I have a tremendous amount of energy, and I haven't done anything like outside of that. And I just said, yeah, you created that. Like your body was holding on to all of this, and you allowed that to become free, and you see just how much lighter you feel whenever that's cultivated.
She lost 4 pounds from crying.
Yeah, her words.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I believe you, but that's incredible. I yeah, I could kind of relate to you were describing your father. So my father's he's still alive, but I can really relate to he's I was born here, but my parents are Indian, and he had an Indian dad who kind of wasn't around because he was in the army. I think there's something about fathers, a lot of fathers. I think fathers in certain cultures, but it feels like fathers anyway, because I've spoken to a lot of people of different cultures and backgrounds about this, and they talk about generational trauma. I feel that's generational trauma, these patterns that get passed down. And speaking for myself, um, when I've been able to open up and cry around others, it's actually tended to be more around women.
Mm.
Um, I, that might be something to do with, my dad. I don't know. There might be something there, but I think that might be because that's probably partly, though, at least because of the whole crying in front of another man. Boys can't cry in front of other boys. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, I wanted to ask you, Brandon, in your, and you said you don't cry every day, but you kind of let the tears come out. And I've tried to be a lot more conscious about that now. Do you feel that when you cry right now, or like when folks allow themselves to cry, as well as that moment of release, historic stuff can obviously be shifted, right? So do you think a lot of us, when we cry, it's tapping into historic stuff, or am I being a bit too? Am I generalizing a bit too much there? I'm probably thinking of myself. It feels like for me, there's still stuff that I need to shift. So I'm curious to hear your take.
No, I think it's definitely possible, and you mentioned the generational piece, and I believe that that's such a huge part of it. You just think about um, you know culture, and you think about you know me being an African American. You think about what my parents went through, what my grandparents went through, and you
Mm.
think of the civil rights movement, and you
Right.
think of the identity or the need, especially, and I'm going to speak specifically as an African American, to be tough. Like you have to stand tall, and you have to keep your shoulders upright, because this world, in certain aspects on a cultural level that were even more prevalent back then than they are now, these are different aspects that if you showed weakness, or you showed, if you were around crying, then there was this aspect or this degree that you could be taken advantage of,
Hmm.
or that you wouldn't be able to survive. So I do believe, on a historical context, where our parents and our grandparents, no matter what the racial mixture is, the relationship in regards to the vibration of the world, in regards to women's rights and women's abilities as well, um, to have more freedom, freedom for themselves. That has in itself, I believe, it's opened up more opportunities for men to be even more expressive themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Sure.
And the as well as the I don't know, the as an example, just recently, just prior, I don't know when this is going to go out, but just this past weekend, Kobe Bryant passed away.
Right.
And I remember when I got a text message, I had actually, I was starting my day, and I got a text message from my sister. And when she sent it to me, I saw it and I felt like, what? Is this real? Is this kind of a joke? And I Googled and I saw this, and I started crying. I was just kind of, and my fiance, she was kind of in the room, and she was, doing her own thing. And at first she didn't see me, but I I started crying, and it's just like feeling the emotion, and then her and I had a conversation, and then I felt good. I felt okay. I still felt a bit, like it was a lot of emotions around that.
Hmm.
And then later on, some more information came out, with other people, and his daughter on board, and I literally felt this wave of emotions again. And I went for like an hour walk, and as I was walking, I was crying, and I was listening to music, And I only reason I bring that up is I think that, looking back on that years ago, or on a previous version of myself, there's no way I would have, one, cried in front of, my partner, and two, been walking down the street, crying and feeling that. And I don't know, I just think that there is, I know you mentioned for yourself with feeling more comfortable expressing that in front of women. Recently I put together a men's group, and one of the most powerful transformations I had in my own personal evolution was I've gone through men's groups myself, and it's in the right context when you have loving and supportive and non-judgmental men in there who allow you a safe space to just communicate. You'd be surprised, what over time with that relationship can develop, and what can come out, because I was the exact same way before I did something like that for myself personally.
Mm, yeah, for sure. Yeah, even hearing you talk about that, like, I remember like films can really get to me. And I went through a phase, especially when I was with my family, because I'd watch a lot of films with my family growing up. I could feel the tears coming, but I'd suppress them. Now I try and just let them come out. Um, yeah, I don't know what happened. Somewhere along the line, we feel we can't do it. There's this kind of vulnerability that comes with crying. I wanted to ask you, well, I was going to say briefly or not so briefly, depending on how much you can say about it,
Yeah.
about anger. Because that feels like quite an important emotion too. They say, right, crying and anger. I remember when I was in therapy, I'm like, I'm not an angry person. And they say, oh, where does that anger go? And I was like, and it just, a couple of times it came out really intensely, and it always finished up with me like bursting into tears. Like it was like an out of body experience where I got so hot, I was punching stuff. I honestly didn't know who I was, and then I would just collapse in tears. And they say like anger is a secondary emotion to crying that's underneath. I just wanted to know if you've got any take or understanding of anger.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear you say that, because my relationship with my previous relationship with anger would be, there would be a lot of repression.
Mm.
Maybe somebody would say something or something would happen, and over time I would just stuff it and stuff it, stuff it, and then it would come out into this huge outburst. And I used to get in fights, high school, college, and you know, um, my anger would come out whenever I was drinking. And I didn't have any awareness of that, during the time, whether it be in college, whether it be, outside of college and as an adult. And it really wasn't, for me, what I recognized, and this can be for many men as well, is a lot of the anger that I was experiencing, and anger has so many different ways of showing up. Mine was centered around anger towards my pops, who had passed away, and anger around feeling abandoned, you know. And underneath that anger was sadness.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of the root of anger is, what's underneath that anger. We feel like we're being taken advantage of. We feel like we're not being heard. We feel like we're not able to express something that we're holding on to inside of our body. There's a awesome book called The Body Keeps Score. And I'm not gonna butcher the guy's name, but he's Dutch from the Netherlands.
It's so interesting you mentioned that, because one of my good friends has mentioned that book to me, and he was like sending me WhatsApp screenshots, and I'm like, oh my God, this looks amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of long, and it can be very scientific, but it's an awesome book to really talk about trauma and how we do store emotions inside of the body. And I don't know, I think we all have quote unquote vices, things, whether it be numbing agents, whether it's, for some people that could be, it could be sugar. For some people, it could be sex. For guys, it could be porn. It can be, alcohol. we all have something that if we don't monitor or we pay attention to it, it's something that we can tend to lean on when we're feeling a certain way. And in my experience, when I became more open, and obviously was this it's always a work in progress, you know, but when I got away from the sugar addiction, because I used to used to eat a whole bunch of sugar when I would feel a certain way. When I got away, from previously having a porn addiction for almost 15 years, I got away from that. At one point, I maybe had even a sex addiction, got away from that. Another point, was drinking alcohol obsessively, got away from that. Once you start getting kind of releasing all these different things, it really just leaves so much more space for what is true.
Mm.
And then you have to kind of look at it dead on, dead center. It's like if I'm not running and numbing whatever's happening inside of my body, then it's like right here in front of me to look at. And then that's when we know what's really true and what's real for us, is when we can get to that moment. And then once we're in that moment, in my theory, that's when the magic happens, because you're lighter, you feel more free. Then you're able to really focus on, what do I truly desire? What do I truly want? And you're able to see it because you're not holding on to layers upon layers of different aspects, or using different things to for lack of better terms, numbing agents. And that in itself is a process. And I mentioned it being a process because if you're like most people, if whether you work a 9 to 5, or you have responsibilities, it takes time to become clear. We can set intentions, which are beautiful, and intentions, place us in a state where our mind is naturally focused on what it is, the question that we're asking ourselves. But even with that beautiful piece, that great starting process, they're still quieting down all the other aspects in order to just hone into what's true and what's real.
On that, something I wanted to ask about, that's part of it, but I want to go back a little bit. When you were talking about generational trauma, I have a friend, he's an ENFJ, he's younger than me, and he's Vietnamese. His parents grew up during the Vietnam War in Vietnam. And, he's lived in California his whole life, but he's always had these anxiety problems. And he would talk and say, I don't know why I have this anxiety, crushing anxiety all the time. And he's a gay man. He's very artistic. He's very tuned into his feminine energy. So he's very emotionally expressive, and he was never accepted by his family. And I said, do you think the anxiety piece is related to you being an intuitive feeler and having these emotions, carrying them, expressing them, and the war trauma that your family went through? I feel like a lot of intuitive feelers, we take on the emotions almost for our family. Like if you have that dad that can't express, you kind of carry his stuff a little bit. And I feel like I've always taken on other people's emotions. Do you have that? Do you feel like you've taken on other people's emotions, or maybe unconsciously been processing other people's emotions?
Yeah, no, that's beautiful, Lauren, because it's so true. When in my experience, I think back, to my ancestors, and think about certain aspects. This is a beautiful world now. Not to say it wasn't beautiful back then, but for me to have this opportunity to connect with you guys, for me to create a business in which I love, where I'm working from my laptop each day and I'm connecting with people all around the world, like that's a privilege, that's an honor. And that wasn't something that was available back, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So I believe that, we're all in this life to experience whatever it is that we have in front of us in order for us to continue to grow. And those traumas, and all of us have traumas. It just depends on the level as to which our relationship to it, and what exactly it was that happened, or that we see. It's almost this, because my experience of it is there's always one person who, has to wake up with inside of the family, and they have a lot on their shoulders. They have a lot to you're taking all this generations stuff and you're taking all these different aspects and you kind of feel like you're alone. And maybe there's this piece where you know, family doesn't understand me. Maybe some friends, I have to kind of create new relationships or new circles of friends. And that's a very humbling process, especially if you're going through it completely by yourself and you're not connecting and seeing other people. And on the trauma piece, the more that we, there's like inner child work, and there's different aspects when we start to quiet down our mind and we start to um, open up ourselves for the ability to see different things, to process, to see. When we're taking on other people's energy, then we're able to more kind of create that line, say, oh, is this mine? No, this isn't mine. This is kind of theirs. I recognize it, that it's theirs. And um, I believe that, especially as intuitive feelers, it is so, the self-care piece, it's a lifelong aspect. It's not a like, oh, I'm gonna, have a New Year's resolution and do this, for 2 months, or try this and do that. No, it's the boundaries, which I think is the number one aspect, that what I see in every single client I work with is the need or the necessity to create new boundaries.
Mhm.
Sometimes that's within their, relationship at relationship in their own family. Sometimes it's at their work. It's like, well, I can't do that. It's like, no, well, you for your health, you're going to have to speak up for yourself, or you're going to create a new relationship to this, because this is no longer serving you. So sometimes we really have to put a line in the sand, and put ourselves first, which that's another thing. That's the number one aspect I hear. Well, I would feel guilty if I did that. I feel guilty if because, whether it's my kids or whether it's at my husband or my job, it's like, I can't do that. But no, if it serves you, we can only show up to the degree for other people that we show up for ourselves. And intuitives and intuitive fielders, when we honor that, we recognize it and we honor it, and we really do truly put ourselves first from a place of not selfishness, but I guess from a place of selfishness, I'm going to say selflessness, but taking care of ourselves, and it allows us so much more freedom to be able to choose who we dedicate our energy to, choose the amount of time we spend doing certain activities, and really almost create like this bubble for ourselves, for our own safety, so that we're not just leeching and leaking energy in a whole bunch of different areas.
Yeah, I love that. I find that too with myself and my clients. It's boundaries. It's so hard for us.
Yeah. I'll mention this, like my fiance, she's ESTP, and on the surf, that's the polar opposite of INFJ. And Lauren and I have talked about this before, but I think on the surface, some people will look at that and say, "Oh my God, that's crazy," And there are certain dynamics. We're polar opposites. She's from a completely different culture in Europe that is very much more collective. I'm obviously here from the States, and it's a very individualistic culture. She's more extroverted and loves to be around people and social gatherings, and like, oh, I get so much energy from that. I do that in very limited dosages. But however, what I've learned, and this is something, I went to her home country, which is in Finland, for the first time. This was in 2017, and I met her family, and it was like my first time there, and I'm meeting all these people, and it's awesome. I love culture, I love traveling, and I'm just kind of taking all this in, but I completely became burnt out, you know, like just being around so many people and being introduced. And I told her, I remember this, I said on Christmas Day, or the day before Christmas, I said, look, tomorrow I'm taking the whole entire day to myself, and I'm going to read a book. I'm going to just be by myself. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to go anywhere. I need my space. And I felt so uncomfortable at the time creating that boundary, because this is the first time I had met her family. And her family is like, hey, we're going to go here to this place. We're going to go for a walk. And I'm like, no. And she's telling them like, no, Brandon's not, he's wants to kind of hang out with himself and do this. And I'm just like, what's going on? Is he not happy? Is there something wrong? And I honored that. I spent that whole day to myself, just reading and relaxing and recharging my system. And then the next day I explained, to the mother, I said, yeah, I need to create my space. And I've been kind of, I've recognized whenever I'm stretching myself too thin immediately. And I know I can recognize it, and I recognize it. I'm sure clients and other intuitive fielders recognize it. You close off your heart, because you start to create these walls, and you're essentially pushing everything out, and like everything makes you, for lack of better terms, you create resistance to everything around you. And I could feel that.
You come off as like cold and irritable, and
yeah,
just like putting up with it for people. And so so it's almost like you're better off not being around people, right? You're better off just them seeing you in your natural light state.
Love that. Yeah, that was it, And it's interesting. We've been back a couple of times since, and within our relationship, we both accept certain boundaries of the way that the person is. So if we go out, we go dancing or go to somewhere else and have a good time, okay, I'm there for 2 hours. It's a 2-hour cutoff, and then I'm out. Or if we go out to travel together, I like to take in like a little bit deeper of the culture and go on tours and do different things. She just wants to go to a lot of different places, and that's fine as well. But it's like, well, I'm going to spend some time to myself and go explore different items by myself, and creating that kind of that dynamic and that communication piece with, hey, these are my boundaries. Hey, this is my office. This is my space, my sacred space. And the more that I feel like we can honor that, the more that we're able to express and be our most authentic selves. But then our heart is not necessarily getting to this point where we're just like closing off and not shining that light that you mentioned, Jazz.
Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say that's beautiful. It feels like it's just about honest and open communication, right? And I guess with that comes honest and open emotional expression, which sounds like you got a beautiful thing going on there. Just really quickly, I wanted to ask you: do you ever wonder? I'm kind of picturing you with the family and getting worn out, and then I obviously know your background working in sales and sport. Do you ever wonder how you did that? Have you found that I don't know if it's just me, but I used to work in the city too, and now I'm like, I don't know how I did that. Like, I get tired so easily now. I'm just different. I'm just used to a different pace. Or were you just kind of blissfully unaware, like I was? I'm glad I didn't know I was a highly sensitive person when I worked in the city in some ways, because I'm like, weird way.
No, that's an awesome question. I think the funny part about it is I think the biggest thing, I've always been a person who moves a bit more methodical and very relationship focused.
Right.
And in a culture where it's, very numbers driven, very competitive, very kind of, when I say numbers, I also mean output, kind of like the faster and the more efficient. I used to have certain managers or certain leaders, for lack of better terms, who we would butt heads. They would be like, you can have so much more output. Like if you place this many more calls and you have this opportunity. And I said, no, like that, it's without knowing any of this INFJ stuff. I was like, I don't move that quickly. Maybe I talk quickly. It comes across that I kind of, I may be able to just go out and do all these different things. But while I was within that realm, and I think that's another reason those tears came up, because one of the lines, it said like, INFJ salesperson is like the polar opposite. A Ferrari INFJ salesperson is like the polar opposite type of, career that an INFJ wants.
Mm.
And I felt like I was within that. I was working for the number one brand, professional sports brand in the US, maybe even one of the top 3 or 4 in the entire world. I was, kind of what society would say is in this beautiful spot. And don't get me wrong, I enjoyed certain aspects, but really what I recognized, and I told my boss this at the time whenever I resigned, because I put in my notice, and that's a whole other conversation. But I said, man, in another life, it would be awesome if this was it for me. If this was like working here, making great good money, I have stability, I've built this up, and this is kind of like, oh, this is Brandon Bennett. This is what's quote unquote meant for you to continue to experience. But I said, that's not it though. Like this is only a piece of it. And I'll say this because I speak to a lot of people who reach out to me, whether it's on LinkedIn, and people who feel stuck, people who are like, well, I'm here. I've been doing this and I'm in this spot. And the stories that we create for ourselves are so powerful. So if you're in a place that you no longer truly desire to be, and especially if you're an intuitive feeler, then recognizing and truly honoring that, hey, this is not where I no longer desire to be, and focusing the energy and the attention towards what you truly desire and what you truly want, that in itself is going to give you so much more power and open up so many more possibilities than staying in doing something that you absolutely, that may no longer be serving you, or in some cases that you hate. If you genuinely know that you hate your job, then it's just not good for your health. You can make X amount of dollars and you can have great family and friends and all these things. But if you go into a place that truly, is not, serving you, then let's create a new story around it. Let's focus the energy on what will, and just instead of feeling judgment or guilty, say, wow, okay, this is cool. Like my journey has brought me to this point so I can experience this. And now I get to create a new story and get to tap into that. And one more thing, I have a client, because when I left, I just had this, I'm ambitious and I'll figure it out. And I know how to sell and I know how to communicate with people. So I'm going to go out here and I'm going to make it work and make things happen. And I fell on my face. It was a part of the journey, and I'm so grateful for it today. But I fell on my face. I burnt through my savings. I went backpacking through Europe and South America and did all this traveling, and I did many certifications, yoga, meditation, functional nutrition, like all these different things. And I ended up, getting to a point where I slept on my sister's sofa for almost 9 months. And even when I was in that particular point, I said, if I would ask myself, like, could I see myself, if my former employer said, we love to have you back, we would give you exactly what you were making right now because we need you, if I would go back, and I said, no, I'd rather be in this spot. I'd rather be knowing that I'm in right now in this moment, in this spot where I'm on my sister's couch and I'm creating my first website and just on the path to figuring it out, then going back to something that I know deeply is not serving my highest purpose or my highest expression on why I'm here.
Hey, that's beautiful, man. I can relate to a lot you've said. You feel it, don't you? It's a feeling. You just know, like, even if, yeah, you feel it. Lauren, I know you were going to ask something and I spoke over you.
No, that's okay. I forgot what it was. I wanted to make sure, because I really feel like, Brandon, you have every time I talk to you, I was telling Jess, I was like, I feel like Brandon's an enlightened being. And I always come away with these insights. Where can people find more of your stuff? Your writing, your coaching, like how can they get a hold of you, your videos?
Yeah, great question. So my website, which is my first and last name.com, Brandon Bennett, spelling. I'm sure you guys, maybe you have that set up or not. It's just Brandon, I'll say the normal spelt way, Brandon, Bennett, BENNETT.com. That you can sign up for my mail list in there. You'll see lots of blogs on there for a variety of topics, whether some of it's nutritional based, some of it's mental, some of it's around anxiety, some of it's purpose. And then if you feel led, just from this dialogue and from what I'm expressing, if you feel like a conversation, just being able to express yourself over a short context, 30 minutes, you can apply for a complimentary clarity session with myself. It's just my first and last name /apply -now. And let's talk. Like, I've been there. I understand, all these different areas, whether it's health, whether it's in your career, and to certain degrees, relationship. And if I can at least be there and provide some insights, in a shorter context, and that can be useful to you, don't hesitate. Don't hesitate to reach out.
And where can people find you on social media? What's your favorite? Are you on Instagram the most?
Oh man, Instagram. No, I do have an Instagram, and if you go on there, you'll see I haven't posted since Valentine's Day of last year. I would say my best place is Facebook, as well as LinkedIn. LinkedIn is probably the one I spend, I post even more frequently on, but Facebook is just facebook.com/Brandon Bennett Coaching. And LinkedIn is kind of weird. So I don't even know if I should even put that out there. And when I say weird, I mean it's like my LinkedIn.com/in, and then it's like B Bennett 18 or something like that. I'm probably saying that incorrectly, but
I think we're going to have all these links though on your page, right, Jazz?
infsummit.com/Brandon. Brandon, when you said it's weird, I thought, there's going to be a story here. It's going to be like something really like cringy, like from your sports days. I don't know, Ace
no.
Or something.
I'll say one thing when it comes to social, and that's why I started laughing when you said Instagram. Like with Instagram, there's so much social out there, and this kind of goes into the highly sensitive piece.
Right, completely.
That I recognized at one point, I was kind of like on all these platforms, and it was just too many shots of information, too many downloads, and Instagram is the king of that. So for me personally, Instagram, one of those things that maybe this no longer serves me. Let me stick to one where I have a little bit, that I can still stay in harmony with my energy. So that's why I said weird, or I started laughing when you said that.
I completely agree. Instagram just overwhelms me. Like, it's just so much information and even I've tried to curate my feed. There still is other stuff that seems to, and then there's that one page where you see everything from memes to, it's just too much for me. That said, may I remind anyone watching that we're 2 weeks away from Valentine's Day 2020. So if you want to see Brandon's annual Instagram Valentine's Day post,
if you want to see a post from like a year ago to the date, 1 year anniversary.
Wow,
that's pretty cool though. That's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Just to remind everyone, infsummit.com/Brandon is the place to go. Brandon, thank you so much. Lauren, I know what you meant when you said he's kind of enlightened. I feel like I've gleaned some wisdom from this conversation for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon, so much. It was wonderful having you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank both of you guys, for having me. And this is awesome, just to connect with other people. Like, this is a vision that I've had and that I'm sure many others, and what you guys are doing. It's awesome. And yeah, it's grateful for being here, and wishing you both the best as well with the remainder of the summit and all that good stuff.